This is such an exciting weekend for me. I have been working on Mega Build for such a while, and here it is. Finally, dreams can come true. Mega Build, don't go away. Hey ladies and gentlemen, it is Paul from Fat Guy Productions coming to you as always from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. And I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am to bring to you Mega Build. Oh yeah, I am so excited. I am cranked about this thing. This is a project that really tested my boundaries. And like I've always said, I think you can learn a lot by watching people with their successes, their failures, and whatever else that they have going on. And so I'm hoping you guys get a lot out of this. I really hope you enjoy this. So let's go ahead and tell you what Mega Build, the first Mega Build is, and let's get right to it. The first Mega Build today, thank you Gustav for this, the very first Mega Build is going to be taking the Lesney Matchbox SS Cadillac Ambulance and converting it to a Hearse. Let's get right to it. Alright, today what we're going to be doing for the Mega Build is we're going to take this Lesney Matchbox SS Cadillac Ambulance and we are converting it to a Hearse. So thank you for that idea, Gustav. We started by taking this and using my shielded drilling, taking this SNS Ambulance apart. But at one point I decided it's in too nice a condition, so I'm actually going to dig through my scrap pile and change out the body. I have an old body that had a blown out post I'm going to use. Hopefully I can fix that post with the special technique, and if not, then this will be a fallback position. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to test out some theories and see if everything is actually going to work before I get too deep into this. And the first thing I got to do is figure out, can I get a coffin in the back of this sucker? So to do that, I'm going to have to take the interior and get rid of the gurney and the equipment cabinet and the jump seat. Now I tried, you see the saws there, I tried sawing that stuff away and it didn't seem to work overly well. So what I'm doing here is I'm using some sharp side cutters that I use for removing model parts from sprues. And I'm nipping away the plastic, trying to be careful that I don't start a big split or a crack that ruins the entire interior piece. So I'm just removing as much of that as possible, and then the idea is with what's left, I'll lay down a piece of sheet styrene to make a new floor. So we're just going to kind of nibble this away here and see what happens. Gotta go. The interior pieces of these cars are usually fairly soft, but because they are still so old, they can be brittle. So it's really careful, really important to be careful here. Last thing on earth you want to do is ruin this piece. Although for Mega Build, I did come prepared, and I have a lot of backup parts here. But really, this has come out pretty well, and now I just need to figure out how to get rid of that little jump seat. And I'm just basically going to gnaw it off like a beaver. Now, here are the coffins I made using my Anycubic Photon 3D resin printer. And I found these on Thingiverse and scaled them down, and I made like 5 different versions, and I'm doing a test fit to see if they're going to kind of fit, sort of a proof and concept type thing here. Now that I know they will, I'll go ahead and continue to work at nipping away the jump seat here that I don't need. Now this is going to put a big hole where I'm not going to want it, so we're going to have to fill that later. The rest of the stuff that's been nipped away is going to be covered up nicely with a new floor that I'm going to make out of some styrene, so that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, for the early phases, I'm pretty happy with this so far. You see I'm going to put a floor right there, and right now I'm just going to take a razor knife and just kind of clean up some of the extra I couldn't get with the side cutters, so that everything will sit flat and flush, and then I can get back to it later and put the floor down and fill that little hole. Okay, so I've never done a project with this many modifications, so there will be a lot of test fitting. To quote what they say in the woodworking world, cut once, measure twice, cut once. So that's what I'm going to try and do, but everything still fits, and it looks like I have plenty of clearance for the coffin still. So we can go ahead and move on. And what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to use my drill and get this glass out of here. Now I need all the glass I can get because not only do I want to put glass back in the ambulance, but I also want to use a piece to form a back window. I've never seen a hearse driving with its back window open. So I've drilled out the tab and I'm going to just kind of get in there and pop that glass off of it. You got to get it off the little rivet and then slide it back and out of the windshield. And sometimes it can be a little sticky, but you got to be really careful here because, like I said, I don't have a lot of glass to be breaking willy-nilly. So there it goes. We'll put this to the side. It's got some damage to it, but it's got some parts I'm going to be able to use to make that back window. So it's definitely something I'm going to be saving here. Oh, it's going to be razor thin here. As long as I have the glass, I'm just going to do a quick kind of hold it up against the rear window and see if, is there any chance in the world this is going to be able to make a rear window. And it looks like it's just barely going to make it. So that is a good thing because if it wasn't, I wasn't sure what I was going to do back here. So like I said before, I get too deep into everything, I'm just trying to do some of the major things that I see that I have to deal with. So right now I'm going to go ahead and get the lights and stuff off the roof. And it looks like my rotary tool and a grinding stone are going to be the best tool for the job. And I'm just going to buzz those things right off the roof. I'm going to try and get down as close to the roof as possible, maybe leave it a little proud, and then I'll manually sand down. I don't want to put a bunch of big grooves into the roof that I'm going to have to deal with later. But again, right now, you're going to notice I'm going to jump around a lot. And it's because I don't know how any of this is going to come out. I really don't. I went into this eyes wide open, but fingers crossed. And so I'm just trying to get some of the most important stages tackled to make sure that they're going to work out. That way I don't waste weeks of time trying to do this project and have it become a failure. So grinding away we go. Okay, so that actually went really, really well. The metal of these die-cast cars, as you should all know by now, is just crap. And getting it off with a file or even sandpaper is pretty easy work. And so when you have a rotary tool and a grinding stone, you can see it didn't take me long to get those off of there. So that was a big hurdle. And then we can go ahead and turn our attention to some of the other body work. That's kind of where my focus is right now, is the body work and seeing if I'm going to be able to pull this off. Okay, so I want to fill in the rear windows, the side rear windows of this. I'm going to put glass in the back window. But before I tackle that, I'm far enough and I've got enough progress that I'm going to go ahead and get this paint off. So let's get the paint off, and then we can get the body all cleaned up, and then we can go ahead and focus on the next task at hand. But our normal stripping procedure, I'm just using my stripper and painting it on with the brush, getting the base and the ambulance body, and then I get to kick back and watch it do its magic, which, as you all know, I really, really love to watch. And then when it's all nice and loose and slippery and slimy, I will take it over to the sink, and I'll scrub it down in some water, and I'll get rid of the residual, get rid of all the leftover stripper, and we'll see what we have. Okay, so I'm back from the sink, and it came out pretty good, but there's still some spots where there's some paint, but I can get that off pretty easily just using the brass bristle brush. And we'll give this thing a good scrub. That's going to get rid of a lot of the specks and fleckles that didn't come off. We can use the dental picks for grooves and things like that. And it also will kind of even out the body a little bit, okay? The brass bristle brush really makes a nice starting point for you. Okay, so that worked out pretty good, and I gave the body a wash and put it aside to dry. And so while that's doing that, I can turn my attention back to the interior, and I'm going to make this floor. So I've got a piece of sheet styrene here. It's got grooves on one side and smooth on the other. And my intention is to put the groove side up, and I realize this is detail you're never in a million years ever going to see, but I would imagine that the floor in the back of a hearse probably has tracks and stuff to hold the caskets. So I'm going to put the little grooves face up. So I'm just kind of marking it off, and then I'll score it and snap it off and clean it up and test fit it and see what we have there. Okay, so anytime you do this, especially if you don't cut all the way through, if you kind of break off the very end, you're going to have like a little lip that you got to deal with. It's not a big deal. Just hit it with the razor knife. And now I'm doing a little bit of final cleanup where the jump seat was to make sure that the floor is going to be able to fit properly and flush where it's supposed to go. And now we can do a quick test fit and see what we think. Yeah, if my big old fumble fingers would start to function here. But yeah, no, I'm liking that. I think it's looking really good. There's a nice big flat floor, so we can go ahead and clamp it down. And I'm just going to use a little thin liquid plastic model cement. And I'm going to just let capillary action do its job. I'm going to touch it to the seam. The glue will flow throughout the seam and weld these pieces of plastic together. See, all I gotta do is touch it right there, and capillary action did that. That stuff is gonna go everywhere, and it's gonna weld itself together, and then we can put it aside to dry, and we'll deal with that again later. Well, the body's dry and I had the sheet plastic out, so now what I'm doing is I'm fabricating little inserts to fit where the rear windows go. Now, these don't have to be picture perfect, but what I wanted is I wanted them to friction fit. These are just friction fit in there right now. That way I can set them and position them, and I don't have to fight with them falling out. Then once I'm happy with that, then I can glue them in. So right now the goal was to get them as close as possible and get them friction fit into the openings. Now I've got a little thin CA in my little tray, and I'm splitting the tip of a toothpick here to kind of make like a little crazy glue paintbrush, if you will. And after I split this up, I'll dip it in the crazy glue, let it dry a little bit, and it'll seal that wood. And then this will become sort of like a little crazy glue paintbrush, and I can dab CA into all the seams between the plastic inserts and the body. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to do it to every seam inside and out all the way around 100%, because I really, if these things pop out on me later, it could do so with disastrous impact. So I really got to make sure these suckers are in. I don't know. You tell me. I think that is looking amazing, and haven't even put any filler in there or anything like that. I think it's really, really working out great. Now, a simpler way to deal with the lights on the roof is I just put a little piece of blue tape underneath the holes to keep, kind of act like a little bit of a backer board. I'm going to use some AK Interactive hard putty. This stuff is going to dry rock hard, and it's going to fill those holes very nicely. I've heard other guys talking about using epoxies, JB Weld, stuff like that. You could even use CA and baking soda. So yeah, baking soda. I can never remember the two. You know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, I'm just going to use the putty. I have it here. I know it works. And I'm going to blob some on there, and then I'll smooth it out a little bit with a tool, but not too much, because the ultimate goal is I'm going to have to sand all of this flush and flat. Right now, all I want to do is get those holes filled, and then later I can go back, sand, and do any finish filling. And there really isn't any time like the present. I have the filler out, and the interior piece is sitting right here. And as you remember, I told you when I cut out that jump seat, there was a hole there I was going to have to fill. So fortunately, there's a nice little empty trough underneath the interior where I can just go in and push a bunch of filler in there. And I'm actually going to push it through the hole pretty good and let it stand proud out on the other side. And then I'll kind of clean it up a little bit, and then I'll come back and sand it after it's dry. The main idea is I just want to get it completely filled, and then put it aside and let it do its thing. So you can see it, there's like a little lump of it here, and all I'm doing is really, really lightly, because I don't want to push it back out. I'm just kind of scraping away a little bit of the excess, and that looks pretty good. We can go back and sand it and clean it up later. I'm not really a big guy on sanding and stuff on my die-cast cars. I figure the imperfections from casting and stuff like that, that's the way the cars came. I don't really mess with that a lot. But in this particular instance, sanding was a necessary evil to deal with the bodywork that I was being forced to do. So it took me a while to get the roof to be what I wanted it to be. So there was a lot of work going in on that. And then I would eventually have to deal with the side windows. And so the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of make sure that they were on the same plane all the way across, and then I could apply little bits of filler where I needed to, and deal with those sides as such. But so this car, way more sanding, filing, trimming, whatever, than I've ever done on any project before, so it is what it is. Okay, all that's dry. I've taken the backer tape out of the ceiling. I'm test fitting the interior to make sure there's no issues from the roof, or especially from the window inserts, because they do stand a little proud on the inside, which means I'm going to have to alter the glass when I go to put it back in there. I'm actually going to have to cut the back windows out when I do that. Now, I had originally thought about just putting the glass in and filling over that, but I think this ended up being the better way. But anyhow, bottom line is, again, I'm measuring twice, cutting once, and everything seems like it's fitting together really good. So I'm super happy about all of that. And while I was doing that, I noticed that the driver's side front pillar here was really thin. It might have even been split completely. But I'm just going to put a little dab of a CA there, and I can just give it a little quick sanding before I put the primer and paint on it. But I just thought it's super thin, if not broken. I'm going to put a little bit here just to go ahead and strengthen that point, because, God, this would be the worst time in the world now to have that collapse on me. Now, Vallejo paints are a water-based acrylic paint, and I found they work great for painting things like interiors and the plastic and stuff. So I'm just using a little bit of Vallejo black. And as always, I'm going to use a nice wet brush to make sure it flows good and I don't get a bunch of brush marks. And I'm just going to brush paint the interior. It's all going to be behind blue tinted glass. Half the stuff I'm doing on the inside, man, I don't even know if you're going to be able to see the coffin when I'm done. So I'm freaking out about that. But, you know, I'll know it's there, and so that just makes me feel better about it. So a nice wet brush, a little Vallejo, and this will probably end up getting like 2 coats. I probably could have put primer on it or put like a base coat of Vallejo on it, but you really just don't need to, especially this is something that's never going to be handled again because it's going to be encapsulated inside of the hearse. So we'll just go ahead and paint this sucker up black and put it to the side. Now, if you notice that I'm talking really fast in this video, faster than normal, it's because there really was so much to this project, and I want to get it all in for you guys. I don't want to miss any important details. So yeah, I'm smoking through this stuff, but you're going to have a lot of chances to see this, so just sit back and enjoy. So anyhow, while I was working on this, another thought popped into my head, and I decided to make a lot more work for myself, and I decided I wanted to do a wheel swap. I didn't want to do anything garish to this hearse. I wanted it to look like a hearse, but I wanted to give it a little bit of an attitude. And so what I saw in my mind was this thing dropped a little bit and just sitting on some flat black plain steel wheels. So I went out and bought 2 M2 kits that had steel wheels and tires and stuff, and I brought those home. And right now, I'm just going to open one of them and get one of the wheels and one of the axles out and do a test fit to see if there's even remotely any chance that this can happen. And if so, then I'm going to kick myself in the ass later for it because it's going to make a lot more work for me. So right now I've got one of the wheels on the axle. I'm just using the existing connectors on the body. I haven't put in anything to drop it or anything like that. This is just a test. All I want to do is see just how bad is this going to be, and is it possible. So I've just got the wheel in the base, kind of loose. It's just sitting in there. I am going to put the interior in there because I need to make sure everything's sitting the way it would sit together, and then I'll line this all up and see what it looks like, because I think it'll give the car a lot of attitude without taking it from a hearse into some sort of a custom rod. That's not what I'm shooting for. I want a hearse. Now, right off the bat, I can see it looks amazing, but it totally doesn't fit.
Too thick.
But I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking it's close enough that I can make it work. So I'm picturing, first of all, I was going to need to do an axle tube anyhow to lower the ride height a little bit anyhow. So an axle tube was going to be necessary. And so I was going to have to do some modifications to the base, so I'm just going to go ahead and forge ahead with the plan to drop this thing, and this is going to be a huge monumental task, more than I ever imagined it would be. So what I got to do first off is I'm going to have to essentially tub the back here. So that floor that I built and all that painting I did, now I got to cut a big chunk out of it because the back wheels aren't going to fit up in there. In the original, they fit up underneath the gurney and they fit up underneath the little compartment, so there was plenty of room. Well, I've got a flat floor here, so now I've got to make clearance for the wheels. So back to the nippers and the X-Acto knife, I'll trim those out and start making a little clearance. And right now, I have not really understood the gravity of how much work I'm going to have to do to the base. That's going to come back and bite me in the ass a little bit later here, so we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I have the back tubbed now, and I'm going to kind of put the interior back in again, and I'm putting my little test wheel in the rear now so that I can test and see how that's going to fit. And give me an idea of where we're at. And yeah, it's actually going in there. So you can see I can get it in there. And it's still not dropped, and it still already looks badass, okay? You're going to see I'm going to change the tires and wheels to something else. I later realized these wheels are not black, they're blue. And the tires just have too much writing on the sidewalls. and I'm not digging that. That's not what I'm looking for. So we'll be making a change later. But right now, I can see that this is going to work out, and I'm going to keep forging ahead. So here's the other M2 kit, and this one has steel wheels. They're white, but the tires are just plain old black wall tires. So I think I'm going to use this set, save the other set for something else, and I'll use these, and then I'll eventually paint the wheels flat black to get the look I'm looking for. So let's get this M2 apart and get these wheels claimed for this new project. All right, now here's one of the coffins. I've gone ahead and put a little bit of a distressed kind of wood-colored paint job on it. I didn't put too much effort into it. I just wanted to kind of give it kind of like a scary coffin look. I don't know if you're going to see any bit of this at all. And so as long as I've got it out here, let's go ahead and do a little bit of detail work on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some gold carry handles on this thing and maybe little gold corners on the coffin just to give it a little bit of life. And hopefully in the end you'll be able to see some of this in the final product. So what I'm doing here is I'm breaking out some Tamiya gold leaf paint. I forget the number off the top of my head. I'll have it flash up here underneath us. And using my little magnifying visor and a very, very fine Tamiya brush, I'm just painting in some little gold handles. And then I will put in little dabs of gold on all the corners, tops and bottoms, just to give it a little more life. Now look at this. Okay, this is the post I was talking about, and I'm so excited about what I've done here. What I did is I took a piece of copper tubing and I basically slid it down over the existing post. Now there was a little tab of metal in the body and I had to cut a notch for it, and I ended up actually kind of having to tap this down with a hammer a little bit, but I got a really nice fit of this brass tube around the post. Now what I'm doing is that I'm filling it with the baking soda, and then I'll put the cyanoacrylate in it to fill the rest of it. Now this post only was blown out the side a little bit. It wasn't the worst in the world, and I'm going to do more experiments and a whole video on this. But the goal here is to build a post that will hold a screw. Now, I'm not trying to build the Eiffel Tower here. I'm trying to just get a post that will hold the screw. And we'll see how that goes. And we'll do some other testing with it. But I'm really excited about this technique. And I'm going to do a whole video really quickly on this technique, on rebuilding this post. And I think it's going to work out fantastic. So, okay, what I've done is I've got the collar around what's left of the post. And it's really nice and tight, and I packed the hole and the drilled out part with the baking powder, and now I'm putting in the CA, and I'm going to let it not just saturate the baking powder, but kind of run all around the outside of the post and stuff to kind of lock everything together here. And then I'm going to let it dry, and here I'm going to bring it up here in a second so that you can see up close and personal what this looks like. Now look at this. Okay, tell me that doesn't look like it's going to work out. Okay, the big question is going to be how will it drill? Okay, that's really what it's going to come down to, is how will it drill. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and now what I've done is I've ground away a bunch of the base, all of the parts that would have held the wheels on, and on top of it, on the inside side, I'm putting axle tubes. This will raise the wheels a little bit higher up into the body, giving it that dropped look, and also serve as the tubes to hold the axles and wheels in place, because to get the clearance I needed, I had to get rid of the existing parts. And I found out something here. When grinding on these bases, they can get so hot they become brittle, and I actually broke the front corner off of this piece. And fortunately, it had some like teeth to it, and I was able to glue it back together using a little CA. And then later, I'm going to go back and put a fillet of epoxy over the axle tubes, and I'll put a little over the top of that repair section. So far, so good though, and the post repair, it's hard as a rock, man. This is I'm hopeful. Okay, so back to the 3D resin printer, and I'm printing these little tiny embellishments that are going to go on the side of the hearse, and I modeled these in Tinkercad online, and then sent them to my resin printer and printed them out. I made like 5 copies, 5 pairs, and these things are almost hair-like. They're so small, I can't even begin to tell you. But I think they came out great, and they're going to be really nice on the side of the ambulance, the hearse, that is. Okay, so I have drilled out the post, and here I am doing right in front of you the first ever. I drilled it, and I did tap it. I normally don't tap, but I'm putting a screw into it, okay? So it did slip a little to one side. I need to find a better way to control where I'm drilling into the repair, but I was able to drill it, tap it, and right now it's got the screw in it, and I'm putting a little torque on it. I'm trying to be careful here. I don't want to blow it out, but it's actually taking a little torque, so I think we're going to be okay here. All right, so wheel tubes are in. Everything's in place. Let's do a test fit and see how it all works. Well, this would have been a lot easier, except I was stupid enough that I insisted on this thing being able to roll. And it didn't roll at first. So I had to go back and do a lot of additional modifications. I had to narrow the base some more. I had to trim the axles down because it just would have drove me nuts to have done this much work to this project and not have it roll. So I went back and did a bunch more work to it, and now I'm doing a test fit, and everything fits. And yes, the wheels roll. As you can see, it rolls back and forth. So, pretty happy at this point. Normally by this point I've got paint on because I let my paint dry for a long time, and I put it off because I wasn't sure how this project was going to go, so I am going to paint it right now. I've got a couple coats of Tamiya fine primer on it, especially because I had to deal with the stuff on the roof and the rear windows, and here I am giving it a final very fine sanding. And now I'm going to go ahead and paint it with some Tamiya X1 gloss black paint. And as my standard procedure, I'm going to mix the paint with a little bit of a Tamiya X20 thinner, and I'm going to use a little bit of Mr. Color self-leveling thinner, which will retard the drying process and allow the paint to flow out and give you a really nice, smooth, glassy finish. Okay, with the paint mixed, I'll use my normal painting procedures of a tack coat, medium coats, and then some wet coats here. And I'll go ahead and get this black laid down and see what it looks like. Okay, so I think it looks amazing, but it's going to look even better when I come back and put some gloss urethane from the Redline Shop over the top of this thing. But for right now, this thing is looking bad ass. Okay, so after letting the black dry, it's time to go ahead and put the clear coat on it. So I'm going to mist down my booth. The car is clean, and I'm kind of spritzing everything to keep woolly boogers from floating about. And then I'm going to get out the clear coat from the Redline Shops and some hardener. And I'm going to mix all that up together. And then I'm going to go ahead and clear this sucker, which is going to give it not only this amazing glass-like finish, but it's going to make it hard as rocks, okay? This thing is going to be just beautiful and durable. So again, thin mist coat, medium coat, and then wet coats. And I'm going to get a great shot here. Is it right here? Watch this. Look at, okay, see it? See that? See how you can see it going on wet and clear and glossy? That's what you're looking for, and that's what I'm always talking about, the lighting. Now watch when I go to the roof here. Okay, you're going to be able to see this going down. Watch this. This is, you've got to be able to see that. If you don't see that, that's not your final coat. I'm just wet enough to see that, because if I went a little less, it would be powdery looking. Okay? No more, because you don't want it to run. But it came out fantastic. I can't be happier. Look at that finish. OMG. Okay? It's amazing. I can read by that reflection on that thing. I love it. Okay, just because my finish has to dry doesn't mean I can't keep working. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the glass I'm going to try and use, and I've got it into that original body that I took apart, so that I can kind of line everything up and cut the back windows away. Because like I said, the panels I used to fill the back windows stand proud, and it wouldn't sit right, and it'd be a whole problem. So I'm using this body to help me get the glass ready to put into the finished product. Okay, and so a little bit of test fitting. Now with this window, it's got to kind of slide into the windshield opening first, and then you push it forward, and lo and behold, it's fitting pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with this. Okay, so I'm sure you can tell I'm on a roll right now. When you're on a roll, you want to find ways to keep that going. So the base was painted with Tamiya X1 gloss black. It's plenty dry. It didn't get the clear coat. So I can go ahead and permanently install the wheels. And while they're in, then I can go ahead and start painting the white steel wheel with a Tamiya XF1 flat black. And get that done. Put that aside to dry. So it's looking pretty awesome. Now, you know I love homages to the kids who own these cars, and here is this new one. It's my new partner, Harry Nuts. Harry is a monkey that I found taking that first ambulance apart. The kid who had owned it had stuffed him in the back thinking he needed emergency help, and when I took it apart, I was so not paying attention that when I started to pick everything up, there was Harry laying on my work table, and I love him. And I'm not trying to steal Austin's thunder with Jimmy or anything like that, but Harry is going to be my new sidekick. And so I was super cranked to have him, and I think it's just kind of funny as hell that he was stuffed inside the back of this ambulance. And I love him, and he's going to be around for as long as I'm doing these videos. But now I can go ahead and turn my attention to polishing the glass. And this stuff is so brittle. I'm just being really careful. The glass is actually in pretty good shape, and a little bit of work with the flitz polish, and that should be about all it needs. Then when I'm done, I'll clean it up in some water to get rid of the residual polish before I take it and give it a swim in my go-to standard favorite, Gauzy. It really makes the glass work out fantastic. I love the stuff. Always looks great. So here I am just mixing it, trying not to induce a bunch of bubbles. And now I can go ahead and dip the windshield. I got a little stick here that I can lean it on so it doesn't glue itself to the paper plate, because that gets old after a while. So now I'll just kind of wick off the extra on a little paper towel. And then I can go ahead and set it down on the plate. Cover it up with a cover to keep any snot rockets or anything like that from landing on top of it and ruining my glass. And then I'll put that aside to dry until I'm ready for it. Okay, I don't know if you can feel it, but I can feel it as we're getting closer and closer to finishing this, and I'm really jazzed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mask and paint the roof, okay, the vinyl look that it needs. And I found the coolest way in the world to mask this off and keep the taping on the body to a minimum, thanks to Time Rider, who just did a challenge video with Austin over at Diecast Resurrection, and he used this technique, and I was amazed by it. So first I'm taping off all the detail parts using my Tamiya masking tape, and I'm making sure to burnish down the edges with a little toothpick to make sure I get a nice good seal everywhere that I need it. And you'll see what I'm going to do here at the end that I got directly from Time Rider. I'll give you a hint. It involves that glass that you see on my work table. So I've done all the detailed taping, and I've got the body sitting down on this piece of glass. He used a piece of cardboard, and I'm going to just kind of tape over the top of the car and tape it down onto this glass. Not only does it give me a nice, great, stable surface, but look, I'm only putting tape just on the very top of the car. The sides are getting almost nothing, okay, because most of the tape is now laying down onto the glass. And I'm really digging the way that worked out. So again, thank you, Time Rider, for the great tip. So all I'm doing is taking the blue not the blue Tamiya tape, but the blue painter's tape, and just kind of going over the Tamiya tape and then taping it down to the glass. And this is reducing the amount of contact between tape and my paint job, which I've worked so hard on, because I don't want to screw all that up. And then I found one last little detail spot that I wanted to touch up, so I'm using a little Tamiya tape to finish that up. But this is what I have now, just this little tarp laying over the top of my car, and I can go take it to the paint booth, where I will use Redline Shop's Magic Black. And it gives these great vinyl tops. And so here it is, fresh from the paint booth with the Magic Black on it from the Redline Shop. And you know my credo, as soon as I'm done cleaning out the airbrush, I'm going to pull the tape off. Because if you wait too long, you can start to tear the paint and do all sorts of other damage. You want to keep this under paint or under tape as short a time as possible. So we'll just get all this peeled off and we'll see what we have. And hopefully this should really start to make this thing look like a hearse. Okay, seriously, are you seeing this? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because I'm seeing amazing. Okay, this thing is looking badass. Now, you'll notice the back window's in already, okay? That was a little oversight on my part. I had fabricated it and stuck it in. That whole thing was a nightmare. But the back window was in, and I broke so many of them trying to make that happen that there was no way I was going to pull that out, because as I was trying to glue it in, I was trying to put a little curvature into it. And so I was pushing on it with a little toothbrush, and I kept cracking them. So, I ran through a lot of window pieces making replacements and doing that over and over and over again. So once I got one to work, there was no way that was coming out of there. But basically, all I did is cut something to fit, and then I set it in there and held it down as good as I could to make it conform to the shape of the back of the rig, and then super glued it in. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm doing a test fit of all the major components, okay, to see how everything is going to work out. The glass is laid in there, the interior is laid in there, and I'm dropping the body down into place the base into place on the body, and oh my God, everything is fitting. This is an unheard of miracle, and with my repaired post, I can put a little screw in here, and I don't see any reason to even take this back apart again. It went together so nicely, there was no problems. I'm going to call that done. Let's move on. Now, Austin has rightly pointed out on Diecast Resurrection that the Molotov chrome does not always stay perfectly shiny, but I think it's very, very serviceable. And, you know, this thing is never getting handled. I'm not going to worry about it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just pumped a little bit of the chrome out of my pen into this little well, and I'm doing the surrounds of the tail lights, and then I'm going to do the door handles and the bumper, and bringing all the chrome in. I've already painted the scroll work that I printed out of my 3D printer, and that's sitting off to the side, drying, and then I'm going to glue that on a little bit later here. But right now, it's all Molotov all the time. Beautiful. Great stuff. Okay, so after the multi-chrome, all I need to do is a little bit of paint for the headlights, the tail lights, and glue on the scroll work onto the side, and we can call this sucker done. And I guess without further ado, let's take a look at the S&S Cadillac Ambulance, the first ever Fat Guy Productions mega build in all its wicked ass glory. Alright, there it is, the S&S Cadillac Ambulance conversion into a hearse. The very first mega build is in the books, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I did putting it together and bringing it to you. Never before have I been more serious about comments, so please tell me what you thought. Do you want to see more mega builds? If so, let me know and I'll be sure to line some up. Okay. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, click the bell. You'll be notified anytime I release a new video. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below. And as always, this is Paul from Fat Guy Productions, wishing you the most amazing, mega buildy kind of day. I hope you have a wonderful day, have a lot of fun, enjoy yourselves out there, but most of all, be good.